we have the tendency to minimize the effects of emotional abuse as compared to physical sexual abuse. But research has shown that emotional abuse can incite destructive behavior, and it can crush self-esteem, and it can also cause emotional withdrawal. Emotional abuse can include ignoring, rejecting, isolating, verbally assaulting, exploiting or corrupting, terrorizing, and neglecting. And according to Dr. Linda Cole, who is the Church Ministries Director of the Adventist Church, emotional abuse stifles and smothers spiritual development, and it is one of the causes of, it's a silent killer in Christian homes. So this is a big deal, and it's a subject that's hard to deal with. But the Adventist Church has designated every fourth Sabbath of each year as an End It Now Emphasis Day. This is to acknowledge that there is emotional abuse, and as Adventists we say no to emotional abuse. So today I just thought, for those of you who would have been there on Lucy's baptism, she shared her story, and I just wanted us to hear it again. I know she said some of you may have heard it, but just to bring emphasis to this topic. And after that, I would like everyone, as our response as a church, to join Yami and I as we lead in a responsive reading in our commitment to end any form of abuse.
It's going to be a little bit different to my baptism one, but when I was in primary school, I was at a public school, and I lived in a small community. So there was only a public school, public high school, and then the private school from K to 12. And my mum and dad decided to send me to the private high school. There was only 2 of us from our public class who went, so we went there feeling very new and we didn't know anyone. So as a young teenager, when the popular boys started paying me attention, I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. And this was not actually very cool. He became very manipulative. He would say things like, oh, you're really hot, you're really cool, like just keep hanging out with me, keep hanging out with me. I'm like, okay, cool. And it just kept going on. And then he started to notice that other boys were also paying me attention. So he started to say, well, you are cool, but you're also really fat and ugly, so don't get too comfortable here because you're not that great. I was like, oh, okay. He's like, but you're good enough for me, so you can stay with me. When I was 13, he pressured me into losing my virginity. When I was 15, he secretly filmed us in an intimate moment. When I found out at the end, I begged him to delete it. I was extremely embarrassed and ashamed. He said, no, I'll just show some of my closest friends. Then that way they'll know that you're mine. And no one else will be able to look at you. I was like, oh, but I really don't want you to show anyone. And he's like, no, this is what's happening because I want them to know that you're mine, and I also want them to see that you're actually quite ugly. That all happened, and I got into another relationship, and I had a miscarriage. And after that miscarriage, this boy just became extremely emotionally abusive as well. He started to cheat on me and say, well, you're for at home, but you're not that good, so I'm going to go and see other girls, but you've got to wait for me because, once again, you're mine and no one else's. Throughout, this was all of my teenage years, the most critical time of my development. This had such an impact on my identity that even now I struggle to accept that in my current relationship It is actually normal and healthy to not be put down, to not be cheated on, to not be pressured into showing my love and affection through physical acts, and to not be manipulated constantly. When I became a Christian, the idea that I was loved for being me was way too difficult to grasp. I held on because I needed to believe it, but everything else had been so etched into my mind that I just struggled to, and I still do to this day. But God is slowly changing my heart, and I know deep down that all of those experiences were from silly teenage boys, and I will be stronger than it with God's support.
So before we get into the responsive reading, I just want to acknowledge that while this day in the church is sponsored, coordinated by the women's ministry, it is sponsored by all departments, acknowledging that emotional abuse happens to not only women, it's men as well, and children. So as a church, we're standing up, we need to start fixing this in our families, and we won't allow this in our schools or anywhere around us, and we need to lead by example. So if you'd like to join me as we do the responsive reading, I and Yemiko will do the light bits, and if you do the dark, the bold, yeah. You want to start, yes, sir?
Never have grudges against others, or lose your temper, or raise your voice to anyone, or call each other's names, or allow any sort of spitefulness.
Try then to imitate God as children of his that he loves, and follow Christ by loving as he loved you, giving himself up in our place as a fragrant offering and as a sacrifice to God.
Among you there must be not even a mention of fornication or impurity in any of its forms or promiscuity. There must be no coarseness or salacious talk and jokes. All this is wrong for you. Raise your voices in thanksgiving instead. Sing the words and tunes of the psalms and hymns when you are together, and go on singing and chanting to the Lord in your hearts.
Thank you.
I would ask that you could bow your heads or kneel with me as I pray. Our loving Father in heaven, what a wonderful reminder of the hope that we have that Him is. And I thank you, Lord, that we can gather here together to prepare to march to Zion with you, Lord. But there's a few things that need to happen before that, Lord, and that is us purifying our hearts. And I just thank you for the songs that we sang today that can remind us of that. Lord, today we don't come here as finished products. We don't come here as good people. We come as imperfect sinners. We've all done things this week, Lord, that we're not proud of. We've all done things, even today maybe, that we're not proud of. Things that take us further away from you, Lord. And I just pray today that you'll be able to give us the reassurance that we can give those things to you and we can seek your forgiveness, and you can make it as if they never happened, Lord. Lord, I pray today, I thank you so much for Lucy and her courage, not only to share her story, but also that she had the courage to find you in a tough situation, Lord. I'm sure there are many people in this building and in this suburb that have had or are currently having experiences like that, Lord, and I pray that you'll continue to bless them with the courage to search for you, that you will be able to make yourself known to them, and that you'll keep knocking at the door, Lord. And I pray that you'll impress on our hearts, that we can be your hands that are knocking on the door, that we can open our hearts to the people around us, that we can look for ways that we can nourish and encourage the people that we know and that we meet, that we can show you to them in a real way. Lord, I pray today that you'll be with Pastor Derek as well as he prepares to share your words with us. Give him the wisdom and give him the words to speak that will make a difference in our hearts, that will stick with us through the week and that will nourish us and help us to grow more towards you and grow closer together as a church body. Lord, today I also want to pray for the Sabbath school leaders. I thank you for the work and the effort they put in each week to planning different ways and ideas that they can share, different lessons that you've revealed to them and revealed to each of the Sabbath school members during the week, Lord. And I thank you so much, especially for the Sabbath school leaders in the kids' groups. They do so much work, they put in so much time and effort, Lord, and it's only through your sustaining that they can do that. And I thank you so much for their dedication, for the work and the thought that goes into it, Lord. So I pray a special blessing on them this morning. Lord, as we prepare to give you our tithes and offerings, I just want to thank you for the blessings that you do give us during the week. I thank you for the way that you provide all of the things that we need and you give us so much extra that we just don't really deserve, Lord. So today, as we prepare to give that back to you, I pray that you'll bless that money and that as it goes to Faith FM, that it will be multiplied and be able to reach so many people around in the community that can hear your word anywhere and everywhere they are, Lord. So I thank you for that ministry too. We pray all these things in your name, loving Father. Amen.
My name is Pastor Derek. Good morning, everybody. Really good to be with you this morning. I have been immensely blessed. Whether it's prayer one-on-one, whether it's prayer in a group in the back room, whether it's the singing, whether it's child dedications, whether it's powerful testimonies, even, dare I say it, if it's responsive readings, children's story by Unc Awful, I have been very, very blessed. Great community, great to be with you. Just this week, went with my wife for a romantic picnic evening dinner. We've been married 20 years, can you believe it? I certainly can't. We're out there with our picnic dinner and this beautiful starlit sky. And Julie looks at me and says, you know what? Our love is like counting the stars. I went, babe, that's the most poetic thing you've ever said in the 20 years of our marriage together. I did not know that you had a poetic bone in your body. She says, no, Derek. Our love is like counting the stars. I said, what? Infinite? She said, no, a blinking waste of time. If you have your Bibles, turn to Genesis chapter 15. Genesis chapter 15. Genesis being the very first book of the Bible. Look for the big number 15. And we're going to start from the very beginning. After these things, so it's continuing on from a story with the big number 14. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Abram, do not be afraid, because I'm going to be your shield, and your reward shall be very great. But, says Abram, here's all the reasons why I don't reckon that's going to be right. And he proceeds to tell God how awful it is that he's at this age and he hasn't had a kid yet. Blah, 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 he goes. And then verse 5, he, being God, brings him, being Abraham, outside and says, look towards the heaven and count the stars, if you are able to count them. And then he said to him, so shall your descendants be. And verse 6 is a clincher. It says, and he, being Abram, believed the Lord, and the Lord reckoned to him righteousness. Verse 2, Abram, don't be afraid. Don't be stressed out. Verse 5, let me take you out, let me show you all the stars in the sky. Verse 6, even though he didn't have the faith, he didn't see how it could possibly come about, he still believed in God and it was counted as righteousness. Then verse 12, as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. Verse 12, as the sun was going down. Whoa. As the sun was going... How did he see all those stars? The sun hasn't even gone down, peoples. Abram was really tested. Tested to believe in things that he could not even see. The Lord brings him out and says, Abram, look, believe. And it was counted as righteousness to him. And then it says that he fell into a deep sleep, and a deep and terrifying darkness descended upon him. Don't for 1 minute think that having faith is about not feeling the fear. Abraham still had the faith, and it was counted as righteousness. But he still felt the fear. Faith is not about doing things when you know it's safe to step out. Faith is about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Abram was terrified. Remember I said in the verse 1 where it said after these things, there's a story before it. So the story before it is the king of Salem, in which Mount Moriah is part of that region. The king of that region came to Abram after Abram had helped all the kings of Sodom to win a war and to capture his nephew Lot back. The king and priest Melchizedek comes out with bread and with wine and blesses Abram and blesses his God. And Abram is so impressed with the blessing that he received that he said to Melchizedek, I am willing to give you 1/10 of my income. And Melchizedek's aide says, no, we don't want your money, just give us some of your crew. And Abram said, no, I want this to feel like a sacrifice. I am willing to give up 1/10 of all that I own to give to you and your king to show an appreciation for them and to God for what he has done in my life. Now, I don't know whether that's part of the darkness that came over Abram. I don't know whether that's some of the fear that was going through Abram. I don't know whether it was some of the things where God is saying, don't worry, I'll be your shield, says God. I will be your shield and your reward will still be very great. But Abram was willing to sacrifice, to give up something that was important to him in order to show his allegiance to God. A bit further on, another 7 chapters, and we come to the infamous story of Abraham hearing the voice of God once more and being told that he is to take his only son and to sacrifice. After all the promises that had been given before, and even though Abram stepped out in faith, not knowing what was in front of him, he finally gets this son that he's been praying so hard for, and now this voice, this schizophrenic voice, is saying, Abram, take your son, your one and only son, go for a walk to somewhere where I will show you on the way, and there you are to sacrifice him. Now, if I start hearing voices like that, you've got to promise to lock me up. But he goes In the middle of the night, he takes his son, he takes his 2 servants. They saddle their horses, their donkeys, and off they go. And they're just walking and they don't even know where they're going. Finally, they get to a point where Abram hears that voice again. You see that Mount Moriah? That hill in the distance? That's where you're to take him. Abram says to his 2 servants, you're to stay here, I'm to keep going off with my son to make a sacrifice. Along the journey, the son gets curious. So, Dad, where's the blinking lamb? It's all right, son. God will provide. Until at some stage it's got to dawn on Isaac what's going on. Doesn't go kicking and screaming. I'm guessing Abram's an old man and he's a young boy. It's not like he can't turn on his dad and just give him a whop and then run for his life. The old man trying to come back, son. Isaac lies on that altar. Isaac realizes that this is a sacrifice from his father, and he's willing to be a part of that sacrifice. You think 1/10 of the income was a sacrifice for Abram? You better believe it. You think it's even more that he's sacrificing his own son to show God that he's committed, that he's going to pass this test? In 1 Chronicles chapter 21, you have another story, another horrid story, where it says that Satan stood up against Israel and incited David, their leader, to count the people of Israel. I go, so what? What does Satan have to do with going onto a leader and say, hey, why don't you do a census? Why don't you do a postal vote? Why don't you go out there and check out the numbers? Not a biggie, yeah? Except for in Exodus chapter 30, God specifically says, hey, if you are a leader, don't ever make it about the numbers. I forbid you to do these census things where it's all about the numbers. Might be an idea for us as a church to sometimes not worry about the numbers. No, David says, I'm going to do a census. He tells his servant Joab, I want you to go and count. Joab's like, Exodus 30? No. David says, I am your king. I am your leader. I will use emotional abuse to get what I want. You will do as you are told. And so he does. Off he goes and he counts. But refuses to count the Levites, refuses to count the Benjamites, because he knows that he's not even going to include the numbers of the priests in this. He's guessing that David's doing this count off for a war. He's not going to be a part of this. No, I refuse. I'll give you your numbers, David, but you're not knowing about the priests. You're not knowing about our spiritual men. Things go terribly wrong. And David in his heart knows that it's his responsibility that things aren't going very well. Don't for 1 minute, people, think that your personal sin is between just you and God. I hear it oftentimes where you'll confront a young person and say, hey, I just want to know what's going on for you. Where are you at with God? Where are you at with family? What's going on with you with church? And they'll say, Pastor D, it's none of your business. That's between me and God. And I'm like, cool, this is not a gossip session. I'm not asking because I want to know all the goss. But you need to realise, you need to understand that what you do is not just between you and God. What you do affects community. You may not think that. You may think it's a private thing that goes on between, you and your private life. But it affects who you are. And when you walk into a community like this, and we're all interacting, and we're all getting to know one another, and we're all trying to support and encourage one another, if you've got that private sin, like whirring in the back of your brain, it affects that relationship. Don't ever think it's just between you, it's community. And David realises that his private sin, simply to ask for a count-off, is affecting this whole community. He goes to God and he says, God, I'm sorry. I know I did the wrong thing in getting my mate to go do the count. What can I do to make it right? God doesn't even tell him himself. God sends a prophet to say, Dave, you got 3 options. I'm not letting this one go. You have to understand that your sin influences and impacts community. Option number 1. You can have 3 years of famine. Option number 2. You can have 3 months where I'm stepping back and I'm not going to have any impact whatsoever in your wars and your fights. If they have the numbers, if they have the strategy, I'm not coming in to protect you. It's just you and them. Or option 3 is a plague that will last just 3 days. Now I'm looking at that and I'm going, can I phone a friend? Which one would you pick? Option A, 3 years. Ding! Option B, 3 months. Ding! Or option 3, 3 days. Ding! He goes, I'm going to go option 3. And so for the next 3 days, that plague just goes ape through their community, through their society, until eventually David falls on his knees and goes, God, I can't take this anymore. This was supposed to be about you and I. Why is it that all these people are suffering for you and I? Please, I'm the one that you should be after, not them. Let them go. And so God instructs the angel to go on pause. Not on stop, on pause. David hears a message from another prophet. I want you to go to Mount Moriah, where there is a guy by the name of Ornan, I think his name was. He's got a threshing floor there. David runs. He meets up with Ornan and says, Ornan, whatever it takes, I will buy this property off you. Ornan's like, oh, but David, my king, you are the king. I am but a servant. Have it. I will give it to you. You're my king. If you request it, if you ask for it. David's like, no. It has to hurt. It has to be a sacrifice. It's got to mean something. I can't just grab something that I got for free and then offer it as a sacrifice to God. It's a bit like my 7-year-old daughter when it comes time for the offering, right? It's one thing for me to teach my daughter the importance of giving to God, but that's not her money that's going in the offering plate. That's my money. Here, baby girl, here's some money. Thanks, Dad. And I'll put it in the plate and I'll feel good about myself, even though it's not my money. I'm the one doing the sacrifice here. I give it to her and then I've got to find my own money in my pocket. There is no sacrifice in grabbing what was somebody else's and say, hey God, here, I'll give this to you. David says that's not on. It's got to hurt. And so he paid top dollar for that piece of land. And when the plague finished, he dedicated that land to build Solomon's temple, or what we now know as Solomon's temple. It wasn't going to be Solomon's temple in his head. It's going to be David's temple. That's my money. That's my land. That's my sacrifice. 1 Chronicles chapter 22. I'm going to start from the beginning. Then David said, "Here shall be the house of the Lord God, and here the altar of burnt offering for Israel." David then gave orders to gather together all the aliens who were residing in the land of Israel, and he set stone cutters to prepare dressed stones and building the house of God. And David also provided great stores of iron for nails and doors of the gates and for clamps, as well as bronze beyond weighing, logs, cedar, all that stuff. But then in verse 5, David says, "My son Solomon is too young and inexperienced, and the house that is to be built for the Lord must be exceedingly magnificent, famous and glorified throughout all the lands. So therefore I will make preparations for it." So David provided the materials in great quantity before he died. Oh no. This temple, this church needs to be famous and renowned within all the lands. People need to look upon it and go, "Wow, look what King David did. And my son Solomon, he's too young, he's too inexperienced, we don't know what he's going to be able to do. We'll just leave him to the side until he's a little bit older and a little bit more mature, and then we'll consider it." Verse 6. Something's changed. Then he called for his son Solomon and charged him to build a house for the Lord, the God of Israel. And David said to Solomon, "My son, I had planned all along to build a house to the name of the Lord my God. But the word of the Lord has come to me saying, you've got too much baggage. There's been too much bloodshed." So verse 9, "That son of yours, he shall be a man of peace, and I will give him peace from all his enemies on every side, and his name will be Solomon." David, there's too much baggage. You think it's all about you, but it's not. You think you're giving up control to your young son? That's what you need to do. Give it up. Sacrifice. Give up your pride. Give up your coins. Give up your sense of control, David, because I have chosen Solomon to be the man who will build this temple. Then we go to verse 19. "Now set your mind and heart to seek the Lord your God," he says to Solomon. "Go and build the sanctuary of the Lord God, so that the ark of the covenant of the Lord and all the holy vessels of God may be brought into a house built for his name." David had to sell the vision to his son Solomon. David had to prepare all the resources, all that cedar and logs and gold and all that sort of stuff he had to prepare. David had to bless Solomon. And then 23 verse 1, when David was old and full of days, he stepped away and gave his blessing for Solomon to take over. I've been a youth director now for over a decade. And over that time I've had a lot of conversations with people who will say to me, "Derek, why is it that we're losing all our young people from our churches?" And there's various reasons, too many to name right now. But studies have been conducted, and let me give you some insight as to how a young person's mind will tick and what might get them invested in what church is really all about. Tip number 1. The most important element of having a young person commit to God and to church and to the temple is that you model it from home. That's number one, that it is modelled from home. And tip number two is coming after that is the importance of community. So it's not just about what mum and dad say, but they have some significant others that are involved in the church that will get alongside them and model it and mentor it. Even though they might be young, even though they might be inexperienced, they still speak words into these young people. They still mentor and disciple and what other buzzword you want to use. We may be the ones with the vision. We may be the ones right now that have the resources. We may be the ones right now that are there to bless. And then we step back and let them grow. About 7 years ago, the youth advisory got together and we said we're going to dedicate this year to build up the concept of spiritual accountability. What is it that we can do that we can train our young people and people in our churches of how to do spiritual accountability better? Leslie Bauer was in the room, and in fact, it might have even been your idea. And whilst I would love to think that it got more traction than what it probably did, it still changed my life, Leslie. The concept of jolt. If you've got a piece of paper and pen, I would encourage you to grab them and write these out, because all I'm asking you to do is to find a young person in your church and give them a jolt once a month. The J stands for Jesus. I want you to go to the young person and I want to say, hey, how's things between you and Jesus? How's your spiritual life going? The O stands for others. Significant people in their life. Hey, how's things going between you and mum? How's things between you and dad? How's things with you and your brothers and sisters? How's things with your husband? How's things with your wife? How's things with your kids? Again, not for gossip, but spiritual accountability. The L is for lifestyle. Now this one, you might have to, invest in the young person. You want to get to know that young person so well that you know what those tripping points are. Because in the start of that story with David, it says that Satan was there to incite David just to do a census, right? Because Satan knew that that was David's tripping point, a bit of pride. You figure out what the tripping point is for the young person. And then once a month, you simply ask them, hey, how are you going with that thing that we know is your tripping point? How's that thing going? And then the T is for time and talents. What is that kid's spiritual gift? What do they have that they want to build experience in and maturity in? What do they have to offer the church? How are you going with those things? Are you getting a chance or an ability to use that spiritual giftedness to bless the church community as a whole? 4 simple questions, just once a month. Investing in that young person will change their life. About 4 weeks ago, I had the privilege of taking a busload load of young people away for a special weekend together. Teenagers, aged between 14 and 16, along with some mentors who are sitting in this room and from other churches. And we spoke life into them. We looked at them, we loved them, and we spoke life into them. I want to ask those 3 who are in this room right now that were a part of that to come up to the front. Now this takes guts. These guys are teenagers, yeah, 14 to 16. It takes guts to step up to the front, and that's why I haven't given them any warning, because then they just panic and wet their pants and go running to mummy or something. I don't know. So they don't know this is coming, but I can see them. Come up. Come stand with me. Oh, hurry up. Sorry, that's a joke that probably everyone over like 40 understands. These kids are probably like, what? How dare you? Blackboard, yeah? I've got one person that knows. All right. Hello, Morgs. How you going? All right, so first question, up to the microphone. Let's ask the question, apart from the food and accommodation, which is just a given, what was the best part of that weekend? Blessing, we'll start with you. Up to the microphone, what was the best part?
There was also fun things there. The best part would be the time we spent learning about God. We learned that you should have some time by yourself just to know God better. Just like, you just find your own special place and then just spend time with Him by yourself to get closer to Him.
Cool, good call. Jojo, what was your best bit?
Well, my best bit about the trip was getting to know, everyone as individuals and their relationship with God, like from the adults, the leaders, the oldies.
Oldies, yeah. Okay, you're done.
To the younglings. It was great.
Cool. Ellen, what was your best bit?
I think I liked the jolt thing that we did, like the thing that you were just talking about, like to get to know other people on the trip as well, all the other kids. It was really nice. Yeah.
Good call. Mojo?
I don't usually come to this church, but for me it was getting to know people on a deeper level that I kind of knew of them but never really spoke to them, and it was really great to get to know each and every person there, also like the adults that are there, and just forming deeper connections with everyone. It's really good.
Cool. All right, next question. Over that weekend, there were different spiritual things that we covered, that we looked at, right? I want you to come and just say one thing, one set of learning. And Blessing, you're going to be blessed because when you come up first and you say yours, the girls aren't allowed to repeat. They've actually got to come up with a new one. So Mojo's stuffed, right? So come up to the front and just like you're going to be all right because you've already said one, Alan, right? You come up and you say, yeah, I learnt that jolt thing that Derek was just blah-blahing about. You're allowed to say that again, all right? But everyone else has got to come up with their new thing. Blessing, you got one? What was one thing that you learned? Yeah.
How to be more involved in church.
Meaning what?
To be involved in church.
Yeah, I know what that means. But what does it mean for you personally? Like what did you get out of that session?
Oh, they said go to the business meetings.
There was probably just one thing, Blessing, that wasn't going to get me in trouble with Pastor Niku, and that's the one you just named, yeah? So get involved with meetings. Why?
Because that's how you can give your idea on how you want the church to be, how it should be run.
Good man. Yeah, your influence, yeah? Well done. Jojo, what was yours? Your one big aha.
I think my one big eureka, probably, like one of my favourite times on there was the Hour of Power, where I actually got to just take time out of my busy week and busy schedule and just stop and take in like everything that's physical about God. Like just feeling the sun on my skin and the freezing water on my toes. Oh, it hurt, but it was nice. It was just taking just that time that is, time is precious, as you all know. I'm starting to know that as a young age. But just taking time out of your busy schedule to just think and be with God by yourself. I really like that.
Cool. Good share. When I was these guys' age, 5 minutes of prayer and my knees would be hurting and I'd be wanting to fall asleep. These guys did an hour by themselves, just them and God. Very powerful. And the thing that I want to say to that, like Jojo's coming up and saying that was actually my favourite part. When we did what was your favourite part to all of them, they all had to share what their favourite part of the weekend was. I was surprised by how many said prayer time. That blew me away. Ellen, do you want to share your Jolt thing again, or you got another one? Like, what do you want to do?
No, I like Jolt.
All right, tell everyone what Jolt is, because I think they were sleeping when I told them.
Okay, so Jolt's just like when you talk to another person in the church, or it doesn't have to be in the church, but about their spiritual journey and how they're going at the time with like family, friends, God. Yeah, I think it's just a good way to bring it up in a conversation, and there's like a structure to it as well, so it makes it a lot easier to...
Why? Why would it make an impact for people to learn Jolt?
I don't know, I think it's just a good way to get to know your other church family and like know what's going on in other people's lives.
Boom.
Yeah.
Good share. Mojo?
What was the question again?
Something about the aha, the best bit, like learning.
Okay. So our speaker that we had was Rosie from Melbourne, and she talked a lot about commitment. And I guess one thing I took away from that is commitment with your relationships with people. I kind of realised that the relationships that you form now will impact your life forever and in the future. So just staying committed and getting to know other people and commit to your family, your friends, and also committing to your relationship with God and just really getting to know Him.
Boom. Good share. All right. One last thing. So, I'm not sure whether you're aware, but the people sitting in front of you actually invested money as a church community to have you be a part of that program. Okay? If there was one thing that you could say to them, all blessing, what would it be? And say it in the microphone right now. So these guys invested in you. What do you got to say?
Thank you very much. I didn't know that, I was influencing others, and thank you very much.
Good call. Jojo, what would you like to say to these good people?
Well, mine's pretty much the same as Blessings. He kind of just stole all of ours. But yeah, just a big thank you of actually investing money in us 3 teens from North Perth Church, even Morgan from your church.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, thank you.
Ellen?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. Thank you so much. It was amazing. Such a good experience. So yeah, thank you.
Cool. Mojo, they didn't give you squat, but...
Like the other said, thank you. Thank you for noticing potential in these people so I could get to know them as well. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, guys. So I was about Blessing's age when I got a phone call from my church minister. Many of you would know him, Pastor Don Felberg. He's on the other end of the phone. He says, Derek, I heard that you did really well at church this morning, and so I'd like you to think about doing the same at another church that I'm a pastor of. He was looking after Manjimup as well. Now what he meant by that is that morning the youth group were the ones taking the church service, right? Remember what I said about David holding on because they're too young, they're too inexperienced? There were a lot of people in Bunbury Church that were like, oh, young people taking the church service. Oh, how could we possibly get a blessing from them? They're so young and immature. But they took a chance. And there was 3 of us, right? You just do 5 minutes and talk about that, and here's your script. You, 5 minutes, there's your script. You, Derek, 5 minutes, there's your script. I went, script schmipped. So we did. We got up and we did the church service that day. At the end, I felt really good about myself. It went really well, and there was a lot of people, and whether they meant it or not, they were really nice to my face saying, Derek, that was really good, well done. So when Pastor Don gets on the phone and says, hey, I heard you did a good job, one of the real struggles we have in the English language is there's you singular and you plural, and it sound both the same. When Don said, I heard that you did a really good job, my ego kicked into overdrive, and I went, damn straight I did a good job. Yeah, I will do that again. I will find a friend to drive me all the way down to Manjimup as a 15-year-old and get up there and preach my heart out. And you know what? Instead of being doing like the 5-minute thing with the script given to me, I'm going to preach my heart out. I'm going to go to the Lord and say, what is it that you want me to give to these people? And so I did. And then that afternoon I got another phone call from Pastor Don. Derek, I heard you took the church service down at Manjimup today. I went, yeah. Didn't you take the rest of the youth group with you? No. I want to acknowledge you today, Lucy, for what you shared up the front. I reckon we should have just packed up our Bibles and gone home straight after that. There wasn't much more to say. I want to acknowledge your courage. I want to acknowledge your story and what you went through. But my one tip for you, girl, is that we have to use our experiences, whether they're good or bad, for the betterment of society. And what I would say to you is there's so many more other girls that need to hear that story. Thank you for sharing. People, we have young people, and yes, they're immature, and yes, they're inexperienced. But if we can just invest in them the way that David was willing to eventually invest in his son Solomon, the church will be better off for it. I thank you for your investment to those 4 teens and sending them on a weekend away. But you know what? It's not just about a small select group. I want you to speak life into young people of this community. Look past the age, look past the inexperience, and say, how can I invest in these young people? Whether it's Jolt, whether it's other things, invest. What is it that you're holding on to? What is it that you're trying to keep control of? What is your Mount Moriah? What is it that you are going to sacrifice? What is it that you are going to sacrifice and make sure it hurts? Because then otherwise it's not true sacrifice. Is it your money that you're holding on to? Is it your family that you're holding on to? Is it your pride that you're holding on to? Is it your excuses that you're holding on to? Is it control that you're holding on to? The stories of Abraham and Isaac, the stories of Abraham and Melchizedek, the story of David and Solomon, all go to show that it's got to hurt. It's got to be a sacrifice. It shouldn't just be, I'm willing to give because I'm willing to. It's got to hurt. And as you go to your young people and you share the vision, share your dreams, as you go to young people and you share your time and you share your money investment, as you go to your young people and you bless them and leave behind your pride, as you go to young people and you're willing to leave them and lead them and let go of your control, then not only will you be blessed in your sacrifice to God, but your community will be as well. May God bless you.